Hey everyone, and welcome back to another FPL video of mine. Cole Palmer is injured and potentially out of game week 3, whilst Florian Wirtz just simply isn't doing it for me at the moment. So ahead of game week 3, I'm looking to make at least one transfer. In this video, I'll take you through some of my potential replacements, some of the best replacements for those players, whilst also covering my team briefly. So let's get into it. So this is my team ahead of game week 3 at the moment. A lot of my team play at home this week, which is probably good. In fact, my team almost looks kind of roller transfer worthy, doesn't it? Sanchez has a home fixture, obviously, against Fulham, which has potential. You've got like Pedro Porro at Bournemouth. Konza comes back in after his suspension, and he has a fixture against Crystal Palace, which, at home he could potentially pick something up from. Murillo too. Nottingham Forest are yet to keep a clean sheet, so I'm hoping a game against a pretty poor West Ham. West Ham were quite lucky to score against Chelsea in the last round. If it wasn't for a Paqueta rocket, it could have been a clean sheet for Chelsea. So moving into midfield, Salah, I'm quite happy to keep him, obviously, against Arsenal. Hasn't looked too involved, but that is just Salah, right? He keeps on getting returns at the death. It's more so obviously the issues with Cole Palmer, who potentially out in game week 3. He had a scan. We were told that it wasn't that bad, or at least news leaked that it wasn't that bad. Obviously Wirtz has not been at it at all. It's mainly been primarily Gakpo among the goals, as well as Ekitike. Yeah, slightly concerned about Wirtz's form. Rodgers could also have question marks over him, but his fixtures are still fantastic. Aston Villa fixtures are ridiculous long term. They rank, they rank the best actually on the Fantasy Football Scout fixture ticker for having the best fixtures, and I just think fixtures will eventually bring the form out. And he's still quite cheap. He's 7 million. He's around a good price bracket, Rodgers, isn't he? I also have Reinders at 5.5 or 5.6 now, maybe 7. I'm not too sure. Who has Brighton away? Brighton have been quite leaky as of late. Obviously, City lost to Tottenham in the most recent round, so I expect them to bounce back this week. But Watkins, I'm quite happy with. João Pedro, happy with going into the next round. But again, primarily it's Palmer, isn't it? Who do we replace Palmer with? Who are we looking to replace Wirtz with? I think both of them have dropped in price already, so it doesn't feel like there's a major rush unless they drop again. But they are potential issues, aren't they? Palmer might not be back until game week 4, even later. If it's later, then that's a major issue, because that would have mean missing a home match against Fulham and Brentford in game week 4. But even just one, it's just not ideal with my squad depth. Obviously, I don't really particularly want to play Wan-Bissaka this week. I could transfer out Wirtz. So let's just take a look at some of the best replacements for those midfielders. So one of the players right at the top of my list is Mohamed Kudus of Tottenham. How good have Tottenham started the season under Thomas Frank? It's been really, really impressive. Obviously, I think everyone expected them to not only win, but win well against Burnley, but to then go ahead and put on a kind of masterclass against Man City, who looked absolutely relentless in game week 1, to just stop them dead and win 2-0 is just a fantastic result. And it also suggests that, Tottenham could be the real deal this season. If this was last season, we probably would have expected Spurs to maybe even drop points against Burnley, lose against City or beat City and lose to Burnley, quite Spursy. But 2 solid performances from Spurs, also lots of goals, which is really positive. 6 goals so far from Tottenham. They were really good offensively last season, but obviously now that they've added key additions. One of those additions is obviously the Ghanaian Kudus, a player who, I've watched for a long time now. When he was at Ajax, when he was in the World Cup for Ghana, his goals, his performance against Portugal. He's a big game player. He's always a player that I expected to be, at a big club, someone, challenging in Europe and stuff. And that's what obviously Tottenham are. They've just won the Europa League, obviously beat Manchester United in that god-awful game. But, they are gaining a mentality now, aren't they? And they've also got excellent fixtures, right? Kudus, he's already got 2 assists, maybe not so much goal threat, but that might come. Obviously, informed strikers, he's got Richarlison, who is scoring at the moment, which makes his, chances a lot more kind of, have more potential. So I really like the Tottenham fixtures so far. Only no red fixtures in the fixtures pictured below. He's just a player that I've loved for a long time. He's also really cheap, right? So if I drop down to maybe from Florian Wirtz or Cole Palmer, I would have a lot of money left over. I could potentially move that into defense, could maybe upgrade Gahey up to, a 7.5 million striker or a Strand Larson or someone like that. So I really, really like Kudus. He is maybe at the top of my list. Anthony Gordon was actually at the top of that list before he got a red card against Liverpool. But I have a good feeling about Kudus again. He's nice and cheap. The Tottenham fixtures look good. Tottenham look in good form. So he is definitely one of the players that I'm thinking about at the moment. So another replacement that I have got in mind ahead of the new deadline is obviously Antoine Semenyo. I mean, how good have they been? How good have Bournemouth been offensively, actually? A lot of us thought that Bournemouth would be an absolute mess. They've obviously lost a lot of key players and stuff like that, but obviously keeping hold of Semenyo is a massive, massive win for Bournemouth. I don't see them doing as well as last season, but I just think, obviously, making sure they've kept Semenyo, the manager Areola, who is, who has also impressed, I just think is really good. Now, Antoine Semenyo, he's already got a couple of goals. He's already got an assist. He's probably the most impressive when you look at the stats, in terms of all of the replacements that you could get for potentially Palmer and Wirtz. He is probably the most impressive. But will he sustain that? It's always a case of, it's not a case of who's done the best so far. It's who can sustain that, who has the fixtures to, add to that, to continue that form. Now, I really like Semenyo. He does seem to have taken on like a main man role at Bournemouth. He is the main man. He's a powerhouse, isn't he? I think he had more shots than any other midfielder in the Premier League last season. So he loves to shoot, which is really good for us FPL managers. He did miss a lot of those, but getting into those positions is a real positive. But if you look at his fixtures, maybe, so I think he's more direct, maybe potentially than Kudus, but his fixtures are less kind of, appealing. He's only got one green fixture. You could look at Fulham at home and say that's probably a good fixture. You could look at a couple of the others and think they're not too bad. And Bournemouth are, they scored a couple against Liverpool, so there are, obviously they can score against other teams, but I think that's my only issue with Semenyo. Yes, he is very direct. He is the main man of that Bournemouth team. Bournemouth are going to score goals in this run ahead. It's just all the fixtures there. Some of them are quite tough, aren't they? Tottenham have been really impressive recently. They've also got Newcastle in there as well and Crystal Palace. So I think that run is slightly tougher than what people think it is. But that's not to say that he can't do well. As the main man at Bournemouth, I expect him to do well. He's also quite cheap as well. He doesn't release as much budget as someone, like Kudus. A little bit more expensive, but he's still, a really, really good price, for a talisman in the team, who are going to score goals. I think it's an excellent price. So Semenyo is another player that I've got on my radar. So I'll also be looking at Manchester United attackers this week. They have a lot of pros and cons to them with Man United. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes is pitched above, but that could be any of Matheus Cunha or Bryan Mbeumo. It's not yet clear who the standout pick is. Obviously, Bruno's just come off the back of a penalty miss. And Mbeumo has been taking corners. Matheus Cunha has been the most advanced, although that may change with Sasko coming into the mix. There's a lot of kind of there's not a lot of kind of clarity there as to, who is the best pick. But if you look at the fixtures, they're not as bad as they look. Obviously Man City, Liverpool and Chelsea is a red fixture usually for any side, but Man City, it's a derby. They've been leaking goals. Liverpool have been leaking goals most matches now. You never know with Chelsea. Even as a Chelsea fan, you just never know, right? So the fixtures aren't as bad as they look. In fact, if you take into account, obviously, Burnley, who were up next, they've also got Sunderland and Brentford, probably three of the worst defences, albeit Brentford just kept the clean sheet against Villa, I still think that those three defences will be at the bottom in terms of metrics at the end of the season. So 3 brilliant fixtures for Manchester United, but also 3 fixtures that they could get points from in big games, right? But it's just who to pick. I think that's the issue. You know, if Bruno scored a penalty, if Bruno converted his penalty in the latest match, I think we'd be having a different conversation right now. He'd still be a standout pick to many. I still think he's a brilliant pick. He's probably, you know, more safer than the likes of Mbeumo Cunha. Cunha, we don't know again how Sasco's position is going to affect him. I like the Manchester United attackers. They're also around 8 million. You know, it's still quite cheap considering. I know it's more expensive than the likes of obviously Kudus and Semenyo, 2 players that we've already looked at. But yeah, it's just deciding which one you like the most out of this. I think I still like Bruno the most. I still think he'll get pans. I think that a lot of Man United fans still think he'll be on pans. He's still very creative. He'll get DEFCON. So I think he still edges the others, and I know that might be absolutely mad to say. Obviously, I like Mbeumo, I like Cunha as well, but I still think Fernandes is my number 1 here, which again, I'm sorry if that sounds crazy, but yeah, so I would also consider the Man United attackers. Obviously, captaincy this week as well, you have to consider because Salah's got Liverpool, you know, Watkins hasn't been great, so there's not many captaincy kind of options out there, is there? So, and this week, Burnley, you know, they've been conceding goals. You'd expect United to score a few goals against Burnley this week, and expect the likes of Bruno, Cunha, and Mbeumo to be among those goals. So I think that's why people are considering United options this week, and I think they're also kind of in my top 3. So yeah. So they are the 3 players that I'm considering, obviously, ahead of the new round. Kudus at the moment is top due to fixtures, form, his output. You know, he seems to have the whole package. Semenyo is also a really good option, but I also really like the Manchester United attackers, right? We kind of went over the fact that the fixtures aren't that bad. Yes, it's kind of tough to pick which one it is. Yes, Bruno's just missed the penalty, but he is still up there among my top options. I think obviously City have been conceding. You know, we mentioned the Liverpool have been conceding as well. So I really, really like those 3 options ahead of the new round. I'm not sold on selling any of these players either, right? Obviously, if, you know, we don't yet know if Palmer's going to start. Even if he doesn't start this one, he's likely to start in game week 4. You're going to want Palmer back in game week 9. So is it worth selling Palmer during that time for maybe options who are average to good? You know, Kudus, Semenyo, and the Man United attacker are all very, you know, solid options, but are they amazing options? Are they options that we are entirely convinced by to swap Palmer out? You know, the Chelsea fixtures are still good. If he plays Fulham, no one's really going to, and we could see leaks, right, towards the deadline. Chelsea do play in the early game. We could well see Palmer is or isn't in the squad, but even if he isn't in the squad, could he be worth holding on to for that Brentford game and for the fixtures after that, after game week 9? Game week 9 when he faces promoted side Sunderland, potentially. It could be Wirtz actually on the chopping block, whilst many are looking to bring Gakpo in. I think Wirtz at 8.5 million or 8.4 now because of the drop, potentially too much. I really, really like the idea of strengthening my squad this week because I don't want to play Wan-Bissaka. I just think there are a lot of question marks over Liverpool at home to Arsenal. Crystal Palace could be tough for Aston Villa. You know, there's a lot of question marks over my lineup. So bringing in someone new with a good fixtures long term could be the best idea. I'm not yet sure what I'm going to do. I'm not sure who out of those 3 that I am going to bring in. I think kind of maybe Kudus and Bruno Fernandes edging it at the moment, but we'll see. But for now, they are my plans for the new round. So guys, that was my potential transfer strategy for Game Week 3. If you did enjoy that video, like always, please remember to both like and subscribe. I am heading towards the 500 subscriber mark slowly but surely. So I do appreciate your support and would love for that to continue. So newcomers, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, please do it now. I'll see you guys again soon.
I'm saving you to save me.